Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again for another episode of Greek Word Studies. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at this Greek word stoicheion. The week before, we were looking at Colossians 2 and verse 8, which says, "Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ." And so we already looked at the word tradition, which comes from the Greek word paradosis. And in this video here, we're going to be taking a look at this Greek word stoicheion, which is translated as rudiments here in Colossians 2 and verse 8. So what we're trying to establish here is this is a warning from the Apostle Paul. He's saying, "Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men," which we established is the oral tradition, the oral law of the Pharisees, which was called the halakha, and they had all sorts of non-biblical traditions. And the Lord rebuked them for that when he said, you make void the law of God through your tradition. And so now we're going to be taking a look at stoicheion, which is translated here as the rudiments of the world. It's the word rudiments. So we'll take a look now at some of these dictionaries that I have on my desk, and we'll get cracking on this study. So the first book we'll take a look at is going to be the Strong's Concordance. You see there the Greek word stoicheion. It's number 4747. There it is in Greek. And then there's the transliteration. And it says something orderly in arrangement, by implication, a serial, basal, fundamental, initial, constituent, proposition, figuratively, and it is translated as element, principle, and rudiment. Now I'll take a look over here at the Walter Bauer Greek Lexicon. You see there's the Greek word stoicheion. It says elements of learning, fundamental principles. Come up here and it says letters of the alphabet, elemental substances, the basic elements from which everything in the natural world is made and of which it is composed: earth, air, fire, and water. And then we also see, as we scroll down a bit, that it can make reference as well to heavenly bodies and of the signs of the zodiac. We'll turn over now to this book here, which is Spiros Zodiates, Complete Word Study Dictionary of the New Testament. And let's see if I can find this word. And there it is. Stoicheion. Noun, a diminutive, stoikos, row, always in the plural. The basic parts, rudiments, elements, or components of something. So that's basically your definition right there. The basic parts, rudiments, elements, or components of something. Among the ancient Greek philosophers, it designated the four basic and essential elements of which the universe consisted, namely earth, water, air, and fire. That's what we just saw over there in the Walter Bauer Greek Lexicon. In 2 Peter 3:10 and 12, the word carries this meaning. Figuratively, it refers to the elements or first principles of the Christian doctrine in Hebrews 5 and 12. Paul calls the ceremonial ordinances of the Mosaic Law worldly elements in Galatians 4:3, Colossians 2:8 and 20. In Galatians 4 and 9, he calls them weak and poor or beggarly, as it's translated in the King James Version. Weak and beggarly or poor elements when contrasted with the great realities to which they were designed to lead. These elements contain the rudiments of the knowledge of Christ. The law, as a schoolmaster, was to bring the Jews to this knowledge. So what Spiros Zodiates is saying here in his Greek book of word studies of the words of the New Testament, he's saying that this word, as used in Colossians 2, Galatians 4:3, Galatians 4 and 9, when it's called the weak and poor elements or weak and beggarly elements, he's saying it refers to the Mosaic Law, which is very interesting, because when we take a look at this little diagram here, this reflection of Colossians 2 and 8 says, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition, paradosis of men, after the rudiments, stoicheion, of the world. The tradition of men was the oral law, the halakha. And the rudiments of the world in this context is clearly the law of Moses, and not after Christ. So if someone comes, as was the case in the time of the Galatians, epistle of Paul to the Galatians, he was saying, listen, these Judaizers are going to come in, and they're talking about the need to be circumcised, saying, yeah, it's great to have faith in Christ and everything, but if you really want to be saved, you need to be circumcised, right? So when they're pushing the tradition, their oral tradition of the Pharisees, the halakha, in the law of Moses, the rudiments of the world, the basic elements of the Jewish faith in this case. Because what it is, it's the basic elements or components of a system, like letters in an alphabet, as we're seeing. That's what Spiros Odiate says, right? Let's see if I can find it again. Stoicheion. Elements, components of something. Basic elements of the earth. I think it was maybe Walter Bauer over here. Elements of learning, fundamental principles. Here it says, letters of the alphabet. So it's the most basic components or elements of a system. So our system is language. We have entire books like these here that we can read and write. We have verbal or oral communication. This is all communication that comes from words and sentences, right? But it all comes down to the basic components, which are the letters of the alphabet. Those are the most basic elements or components of our entire system of communication, be it written or oral. This word rudiments, stoicheion, refers to the basic elements, basic components of a system. So in this case, over here in Colossians 2:8, the system is Judaism, and the basic components, the rudiments of the world, is the law of Moses. We'll just take a look now at what the Complete Biblical Library has to say. So what we see here in the Complete Biblical Library is here are the Greek letters, stoicheion, noun, elements, rudiments, fundamental principles, letters of the alphabet or heavenly bodies. And then we'll just scroll down here. Well, here's a list of all the places in the Bible that it appears. It's translated as elements, rudiments in Colossians, elements in Galatians, principles of the oracles of God in Hebrews 5 and 12. For when the time ye ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles. The first principles is stoicheion of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat. So the first principles of the oracles of God in this case are stoicheion, the basic components of a system. And the elements shall melt with fervent heat. So this case here in 2 Peter 3 and 10 is talking about those elements that make up the earth. Earth, air, fire, and water are the basic elements that make up the earth. And the elements shall melt with fervent heat, again in verse 12. So then we'll come down now to these classical Greek word studies, and it says the substantive stoicheion, which means what belongs in a series, has several usages. In classical Greek, it was used in the naming of the shadow of the gnomon, the length of which indicated the time of the day, for example, the sundial, and in reference to an element, the simplest part of a whole, and that comes from Liddell and Scott. Plato, in the late 5th, early 4th century BC, so this is, a few centuries before Christ, used the term to denote a simple sound of speech. like the first component of a syllable. That also comes from Liddell and Scott. He also used it when referring to the components into which matter was ultimately divisible. Xenophon, a contemporary of Plato, used the term when referring to the elementary or fundamental principles, and that comes out of the Walter Bauer lexicon that we just saw. Aristotle, in the 4th century BC, used the term when referring to the elements of proof in general reasoning. Manetho, from the 4th century AD, so this is like 800 years later now than those previous citations we saw, from 4th and 5th century BC, used the term with reference to the stars, as we saw, also noted that it's signs of the zodiac, right? Along this same line, it was used in reference to planets and as signs of the zodiac, as affirmed. In Walter Bauer's Greek lexicon, Septuagint Usage, Stoicheion appears only 3 times in the Septuagint, and that only in the apocryphal books. It is used to depict the basic elements that make up the physical world. New Testament usage, in the New Testament, Stoicheion appears 7 times. We already saw the list of them. In Galatians 4 and 3, Paul used the term in the phrase stoichia to kosmou, elements of the world. There has been much debate over Paul's meaning for the term here, as well as his use of the same phrase in Colossians 2, 8, and 20. I don't really understand why, because it really does seem very clear. In Galatians 3, Paul's clearly talking about being under the law of Moses, or Galatians 4 rather, and that's exactly what we see in Colossians chapter 2 as well. Ernest DeWitt Burton outlines 4 various interpretations given to stoicheion as used in this phrase: the physical elements of the universe, the heavenly bodies, spirits, and elements of religious knowledge. Taking a cue from more recent interpretations, one might be inclined to conclude that the expression plays upon the ancient belief that the elements of the universe and the planets and stars contain the fundamental creative, controlling forces of the world. These were regarded as the abode of demonic forces who rule all of humanity. In support of this thesis, it is pointed out that the context of Galatians warns against turning back to those which by nature are no gods, with its resultant enslavement in Galatians 4, 8, and 9. The context of Colossians 2, 8 to 23 is concerned with the worship of angels and Christ's victory over principalities and powers. In both instances, the issue is whether Jewish ritual is to be followed. There is apparently some relationship between that and the Gentile and pre-Gnostic belief that the heavenly bodies control such cycles. By submitting to the ordinance concerning these festivals, believers would once again be enslaved by the demonic forces who ruled them in their Gentile or Jewish past. Against this view, it is objected that it would be unreasonable and out of character for Paul to have regarded the Jewish people, whose lives were governed by the law, as under the control of demonic forces. Equally unreasonable is the thought that Paul would call these powerful world rulers weak and poor. So what we're seeing here is that in this complete biblical library, they're putting forth viewpoints that theologians have had in the past with respect to Galatians 4 and Colossians 2, where it's talking about this Greek word stoicheion, and they're trying to say that, oh, this is talking about demonic forces that are controlling people. And what Zodiates is doing is showing their argument and then saying, not so much. Really, no, this doesn't make any sense. So when he says against this view, it is objected, he's talking about how Paul wouldn't be referring to these demonic forces as weak and beggarly elements. He says, equally unreasonable is the thought that Paul would call these powerful world rulers weak and poor. Those unwilling to accept that stoichia can refer to spiritual powers contend that outside evidence of stoichia's usage in this way is absent. Therefore, such an interpretation is unparalleled. For although stoichia does refer to the elements and heavenly bodies, it is never associated with spiritual powers or demons. Consequently, the most natural way of interpreting the expression is identical to the normal interpretation of the verbal forms. Just as there is instruction about Christ consisting of the elementary truths of God's Word in Hebrews 5:12, in the same way there is a worldly doctrine. To To the Jews, the law of Sinai was the fundamental revelation of God. Likewise, using the imagery of childhood, Paul stated that the Gentiles were in slavery under the basic principles of the world in Galatians 4 and 3. The Gentile bondage to these principles of the world, as is particularly expressed in philosophy, do not, like the law, point to Christ. But like the Jewish elementary principles, the Gentile principles of the world are weak and beggarly when compared to the glorious gospel of Christ. To turn away from Christ as either a Jew or a Gentile is to return to the bondage of the elementary principles, either the principle of the law which cannot be obeyed or the spiritual bondage of demonic forces. Paul was explicit here. Both paths of destruction Both are paths of destruction and enslavement. And then he goes on to say in Hebrews 5:12, there seems to be little doubt that the writer is using stoicheion with reference to the elements of learning. And in 2 Peter 3 and 10, stoicheion takes on that sense of that which constitutes the world, the elemental substances or basic elements from which everything in the natural world is made. So we've just seen the evidence and looked in the dictionaries and saw that this word stoicheion refers to the basic elementary components, the basic elements or components of a system. And an example of that could be letters of the alphabet. And that the way that it's used in the New Testament, particularly in Galatians chapter 4 and in Colossians chapter 2, is with reference to the law of Moses, those being the elementary fundamental components of the Jewish system of religion. So Paul again in Colossians 2 and 8 says, "Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition, paradises of men." That's their oral tradition, the oral law of the Pharisees, after the rudiments of the world, stoicheion, the principal basic elements or components of a system. And in this case, the rudiments of the world, the phrase rudiments of the world refers to the law of Moses and all the ordinances and rituals contained in the law of Moses and not after Christ. So that's what stoicheion means, the most basic elements or components of a system. And in its New Testament usage, it refers to the Mosaic Law. Thanks everybody for your time. We'll see you the next time.